The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Rosa stepped onto the 42nd floor of the Wellington Tower. Her cleaning cart squeaked slightly as she pushed it down the marble hallway. The silence up here always felt different from the busy streets below. During the day, this floor buzzed with important people making million-dollar deals. But at 11 at night, it belonged to her. Rosa had been cleaning offices for 3 years now, ever since she moved to New York. The pay wasn't great, but it helped her save money for college classes. Her dream was to become a music teacher someday. She'd grown up in a small town where her grandmother taught her to play piano on an old upright that barely stayed in tune. Those were some of her happiest memories. Tonight felt different, though. Usually she cleaned the regular offices first and saved the big corner office for last. That's where Mr. David Wellington worked. He owned the whole tech company and probably half the building, too. Rosa had seen him a few times during shift changes. Tall guy, always in expensive suits, always looking at his phone. The kind of person who probably never noticed people like her. As she unlocked his office door, Rosa couldn't help but gasp a little. Even after cleaning it dozens of times, the view still took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city sparkling like diamonds against black velvet. Central Park looked like a dark lake surrounded by lights. But what really caught her attention tonight was the grand piano sitting in the conference room attached to his office. She dusted it many times, but never really looked at it closely. It was beautiful. Black and shiny, probably worth more than she'd make in 5 years. The bench was perfectly positioned and sheet music sat neatly stacked on top. Rosa finished cleaning the main office quickly. She vacuumed the carpet, wiped down the massive desk, and cleaned the windows. But she kept glancing at that piano. Her fingers itched just thinking about touching those keys. She told herself to just clean the conference room and leave. Don't touch anything that isn't part of the job. But as she dusted the piano bench, she noticed the sheet music on top. It was Chopin, her grandmother's favorite composer. Before she could stop herself, Rosa sat down on the bench. The leather was soft and expensive. She lifted the piano cover and saw the most beautiful keys she'd ever laid eyes on. They were perfectly white and black, not a scratch or stain anywhere. Her fingers found the keys almost by themselves. The first note rang out clear and pure in the quiet room. Then another, and another. Soon she was playing one of the pieces her grandmother taught her years ago, a slow, sad melody that always made her think of home. Rosa closed her eyes and let the music take over. For a few minutes, she wasn't a cleaning lady in a borrowed uniform. She wasn't worried about rent money or college tuition. She was just someone who loved music, sharing that love with an empty room. The sound filled the space beautifully. This piano was nothing like her grandmother's old upright. Every note was perfect. Every key responded exactly how it should. Rosa found herself playing with more confidence than she had in years. The melody flowed from her fingers like water. She was so lost in the music that she didn't hear the elevator. She didn't hear footsteps in the hallway or the office door opening. She only noticed she wasn't alone when she played the final note and heard someone clearing their throat behind her. Rosa spun around on the bench so fast she almost fell off. Standing in the doorway was David Wellington himself. Her heart jumped into her throat. This was it. She was going to get fired, maybe even arrested for touching his expensive piano. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, jumping to her feet. "I didn't mean to. I was just cleaning and I saw the music and—" But David wasn't looking angry. He was looking confused. Maybe even impressed. He walked into the conference room slowly, like he was in a dream. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "I've had that piano for 2 years and never heard anyone play it like that." Rosa didn't know what to say. She started gathering her cleaning supplies, hoping to escape before things got worse. But David held up his hand. "Wait," he said. "Don't go yet. What's your name?" "Rosa," she whispered. "Rosa." He repeated it like he was testing how it sounded. "How long have you been playing piano?" "Since I was little. My grandmother taught me." Rosa kept her eyes on the floor. She felt like she was in trouble, even though David's voice was gentle. David walked over to the piano and touched the keys softly. "I bought this thinking I might learn someday, but I never have time. Work, meetings, more work. It just sits here looking pretty." He turned to look at Rosa. Really look at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You know what? I have an idea. It might sound crazy, but—" Rosa waited. Her heart was still beating fast. David grinned suddenly. It changed his whole face. He looked younger, less serious.
"If you can play the piano like that, maybe I should marry you."
Rosa blinked. Did he really just say that? She stared at him for a long moment, trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. Rich people probably said weird things all the time. "I have to finish my work," she said finally, grabbing her cleaning cart. "Wait, I didn't mean to," David started. But Rosa was already pushing her cart toward the door. As she waited for the elevator, Rosa could hear David calling after her. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong. I just meant—" But the elevator doors closed before she could hear the rest. As the elevator descended, Rosa's reflection stared back at her from the polished doors. What had just happened up there? Had one of the richest men in the city really just proposed to her as a joke? The whole ride down, she kept thinking about those perfect piano keys and the way the music had sounded in that beautiful room. She also kept thinking about the look on David's face when he heard her play. He hadn't looked like he was making fun of her. He'd looked surprised, maybe even moved. By the time Rosa reached the lobby, she decided to forget the whole thing. Rich people lived in a different world. David Wellington probably wouldn't even remember her name by tomorrow. She'd just go back to cleaning his office like nothing happened. But as she walked to the subway station, Rosa found herself humming the melody she'd played. And despite everything, she was already looking forward to seeing that piano again tomorrow night. Rosa spent the entire next day thinking about what happened in David Wellington's office. Every time she tried to focus on her morning classes at community college, her mind drifted back to that beautiful piano and his strange words. Had he really said he'd marry her if she could play? The whole thing felt like a weird dream. When evening came and it was time for her cleaning shift, Rosa felt nervous butterflies in her stomach. What if David was there again? What if he'd told security about her playing his piano? She might lose her job and she couldn't afford that. But when Rosa arrived at the 42nd floor, everything seemed normal. The hallway was empty and quiet, just like always. She unlocked David's office and stepped inside, expecting to see the usual neat desk and perfect conference room. Instead, she found something that made her stop in her tracks. On top of the piano sat a piece of sheet music that hadn't been there yesterday. It was placed carefully right in the center, impossible to miss. Rosa walked over slowly and picked it up. It was a beautiful piece by Mozart, something she'd heard before but never learned to play. There was a small note paperclip to the corner. In neat handwriting it said, "I'm sorry about yesterday. I didn't mean to offend you. If you'd like to try this piece, I'd love to hear it." Rosa looked around the empty office. How did he know she'd be back? Did he leave this here hoping she'd find it? The whole thing felt surreal. She told herself to just clean and leave. Don't get involved with whatever game this rich man was playing. But her eyes kept drifting back to the sheet music. The piece looked challenging but beautiful. Her fingers were practically twitching to try it. After finishing her regular cleaning routine, Rosa found herself sitting at the piano bench again. She studied the sheet music for a few minutes, hearing the melody in her head. Then, almost without deciding to, she began to play. This piece was harder than what she'd played yesterday. Her fingers stumbled a few times as she worked through the tricky parts. But the piano was so responsive, so perfectly tuned, that even her mistakes sounded better than they would on any other instrument. As she played, Rosa felt that same magical feeling from the night before. The music filled the quiet office and seemed to make the whole space come alive. She got so caught up in the piece that she didn't even think about David walking in on her again. When she finished, Rosa carefully placed the sheet music back where she'd found it. Then she completed her cleaning and left, trying not to think about whether David would leave another piece for her tomorrow. But he did. The next night, Rosa found a different song waiting on the piano. This time it was a jazz piece, something playful and complex. The note said, "You made Mozart sound beautiful last night. Think you can handle some jazz?" Rosa's heart skipped a beat. He'd been there. He'd heard her play and actually complimented her music. Part of her felt embarrassed, but another part felt proud. When was the last time someone had appreciated her playing? She spent extra time on that jazz piece, working through the syncopated rhythms and tricky chord progressions. Jazz was different from the classical music her grandmother Hay taught her, but she found herself enjoying the challenge. This became their routine. Every night, Rosa would find new sheet music waiting for her. Sometimes it was classical, sometimes jazz, sometimes even popular songs arranged for piano. The notes got longer, too. Your interpretation of Debussy was incredible. Have you ever played Rachmaninoff? I love how you make the fast parts sound so effortless. This next piece might push you, but I think you can handle it. Thank you for bringing music back into this space. It hasn't felt this alive in years. Rosa never wrote back, but she poured her response into her playing. When David left her a sad, slow piece, she played it with all the emotion she felt about missing her family back home. When he left her something cheerful and upbeat, she let her joy at finally having a real piano to practice on shine through every note. Word started to spread around the building. Security guards mentioned hearing beautiful piano music coming from the top floor late at night. Some of the day shift workers began staying late, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious pianist they'd heard about. Rosa didn't know she'd become a legend in the building. She was too focused on the music and the strange connection she was building with someone she barely knew. One night, David left her the most challenging piece yet, a Chopin concerto that would have been difficult even for professional pianists. His note was different this time. I know this one is hard. Don't worry about playing it perfectly. I just want to hear your interpretation. Rosa spent nearly an hour working through the piece. Her fingers flew across the keys, tackling the rapid passages and delicate melodies with growing confidence. She made mistakes, but she kept going, letting the music carry her along. As she played the final, triumphant chords, she heard something that made her freeze. Applause. Soft clapping coming from somewhere in the office. Rosa spun around, her heart pounding. David stepped out from behind a column near the windows. He'd been there the whole time, listening in the shadows. Please don't stop, he said quietly. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Rosa's face burned with embarrassment and something else she couldn't name. How long have you been there? Just for the last few minutes, David lied. He'd actually arrived halfway through her performance, drawn by the complex melodies floating through the office. I had to come back for some files and I heard the music. I couldn't help myself. They stood there for a moment, looking at each other across the conference room. David in his expensive suit, looking tired from a long day of meetings. Rosa in her cleaning uniform, her hair slightly messed up from concentration. Why do you leave the music for me? Rosa asked suddenly. David walked closer, stopping a few feet from the piano. Because you make it come alive in a way I never could. I bought this piano thinking it would impress people at business dinners. But watching you play, it's like seeing what it was actually meant for. I shouldn't be playing it, Rosa said. It's not mine. Maybe it should be, David replied. Then, realizing how that sounded, he quickly added, I mean, maybe it should be played by someone who understands it like you do. Rosa gathered her cleaning supplies, suddenly feeling awkward. This was getting too complicated. She was just the cleaning lady. He was a millionaire businessman. They existed in completely different worlds. I should go, she said. David nodded but looked disappointed. Will you play again tomorrow night? Rosa paused at the door. I don't know. Maybe. As she waited for the elevator, Rosa could hear David sitting down at the piano bench. He pressed a few keys, playing a simple melody with one finger. It sounded clumsy and uncertain compared to what she'd just played, but there was something touching about it. The elevator doors opened, and Rosa stepped inside. As they closed, she heard David trying to play the opening notes of the piece she'd just finished. He was playing it slowly, carefully, like he was trying to remember exactly how she'd made it sound. For the first time since this strange musical conversation had started, Rosa found herself smiling. For 2 weeks, Rosa and David continued their silent musical conversations. She would find sheet music waiting for her each night, play it with all her heart, and leave without writing a single word back to him. Sometimes she'd catch glimpses of him listening from the shadows, but they never spoke again. Then one Thursday night, Rosa arrived at work to find something different. Instead of sheet music on the piano, there was a handwritten letter. Rosa, it began. I know this might sound strange, but I need to ask you something important. My company is hosting a charity fundraiser next weekend. It's for music education programs in schools. I was wondering, would you consider playing piano at the event? I know we don't really know each other, but your music has brought something special into my life. I think others should hear it too. If you're interested, we could meet and talk about it properly. David. At the bottom, he'd written his personal phone number. Rosa stared at the letter for a long time. Play in front of rich people at some fancy charity event? The idea terrified her. She was used to playing alone, in the quiet safety of an empty office, not in front of hundreds of strangers who probably knew more about music than she ever would. She folded the letter and put it in her pocket. Then she sat down and played one of the pieces he'd left her weeks ago, a gentle melody that always calmed her nerves. As she played, she tried to imagine what it would feel like to perform on stage, with everyone watching her. The next morning, Rosa couldn't focus on her college classes at all. Her economics professor was talking about supply and demand, but all Rosa could think about was David's invitation. Part of her was flattered. He thought she was good enough to play for important people. But another part was scared. What if she embarrassed herself? What if she wasn't as good as he thought? That evening, she decided not to go to work at all. She called in sick and spent the night walking around her neighborhood, trying to figure out what to do. The next night, she did the same thing. She wasn't ready to face David or give him an answer about the charity event. But on Saturday, Rosa's younger sister Lucia called with news that changed everything. "Rosa, I need to tell you something," Lucia said. Her voice sounded strange and worried. "I've been having some health problems. The doctor wants to do more tests, but they're expensive and our insurance won't cover all of it." Rosa felt her stomach drop. Lucia was only 22, just starting her career as a nurse. She was the smart one in the family, the one who was supposed to have an easier life than Rosa. "How much do we need?" Rosa asked. "About $5,000, Lucia said quietly. "I know that's a lot. I've been trying to figure out other ways, but $5,000. Rosa did quick math in her head. Even working extra shifts, it would take her months to save that much. Months that Lucia might not have if the doctors were worried. That night, Rosa finally returned to work. She walked into David's office with her heart pounding, not sure what she'd find after missing 2 days. The piano was empty. No sheet music, no notes. Just the beautiful, silent instrument waiting in the moonlight streaming through the windows. Rosa sat down at the bench and played the saddest piece she knew, pouring all her worry about Lucia into the music. The melody filled the quiet office with her fear and frustration and love for her sister. When she finished, she heard familiar footsteps behind her. "I was worried you weren't coming back," David said softly. Rosa turned to face him. "I got your letter, and—" "I need to ask you something first," Rosa said, gathering her courage. "The charity event. Do the performers get paid?" David looked surprised by the question. "Well, yes. We typically pay musicians for their time. It would probably be around $3,000 for a 30-minute set." Rosa's heart jumped. $3,000 would be more than halfway to what Lucia needed. "Then yes," she said. "I'll do it." Now David looked completely shocked. "Really? Just like that?" "I need the money," Rosa said simply. There was no point in pretending otherwise. David sat down on a chair across from the piano. "Rosa, can I ask you something? And please be honest with me." She nodded. "What do you think of me? Really think of me?" Rosa blinked. That wasn't what she'd expected him to ask. "I don't understand. Do you think I'm just some rich guy playing games with the cleaning lady? Because that's not what this is about." Rosa studied his face. He looked genuinely worried about her answer. "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "We live in completely different worlds. You probably spend more on lunch than I make in a week." David winced. "You're right. And I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable with that stupid comment about marriage. I say dumb things sometimes when I'm nervous." "You get nervous?" Rosa asked. It was hard to imagine this confident businessman ever feeling unsure about anything. "Around you?" "All the time," David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you want to know the truth? I've been working 16-hour days for the past 5 years. I eat dinner at my desk. I haven't taken a vacation since I started this company. And I can't remember the last time I did something just because I enjoyed it. Then I heard you play that first night, and for 10 minutes I forgot about everything else. Just listened to beautiful music in a quiet room." Rosa didn't know what to say to that. "I bought that piano 2 years ago thinking it would make me feel sophisticated." "Ditto," David continued. "But I never touched it, not once. You made it into something magical." "It's just music," Rosa said quietly. "No, it's not. It's talent and passion and—" David struggled for the right words. "It's everything I gave up when I decided making money was more important than making anything meaningful." They sat in silence for a moment. Rosa was seeing David differently now. Not as the untouchable rich guy, but as someone who seemed lonely despite having everything money could buy. "Can I tell you something?" Rosa said finally. "Please." "My grandmother always said that music isn't about the instrument.
A piano is just wood and strings and metal.
The music comes from the person playing it, from what they've felt and experienced and dreamed about." David nodded slowly. "What do you dream about, Rosa?" "I want to teach music to kids," she said without hesitation. "Kids who can't afford lessons or instruments. I want to show them what my grandmother showed me, that music can make you feel less alone in the world." "And the charity event I invited you to?" "It's raising money for exactly that. Music education programs in schools that can't afford them." Rosa looked at him with new understanding. "You planned this." "I hoped for it," David corrected. "I hoped that maybe we both cared about the same things, even if we came from different places." Rosa stood up from the piano bench and walked over to the windows. The city stretched out below them, millions of lights representing millions of people with their own dreams and struggles and stories. "My sister needs surgery," she said suddenly. "That's why I need the money." David didn't ask for details or offer to just give her the money. He seemed to understand that she needed to earn it herself. "Then let's make sure you give the performance of your life." Rosa turned back to him. "What if I mess up? What if I'm not good enough for your fancy friends?" "Rosa," David said, standing up too. "I've heard a lot of musicians in my life. Professional concert pianists. People who've studied at the best schools in the world. None of them have ever moved me the way you do when you play. Trust me on this, you're more than good enough." For the first time since she'd met him, Rosa smiled at David. Really smiled. Not just the polite expression she gave to employers. "Okay," she said. "Let's do this." The week leading up to the charity event passed in a blur of preparation and growing anxiety. David had arranged for Rosa to practice on the same type of grand piano that would be at the venue. Every night after her cleaning shift, she would spend hours working on the pieces she'd chosen to perform. David often stayed late to listen, offering encouragement when she stumbled over difficult passages. Their relationship was slowly shifting from the mysterious musical pen pal situation to something that felt almost like friendship. Almost. "You're overthinking the Mozart piece," David said one evening as Rosa practiced. "Remember how you played it that first time? It was more natural then. That first time, I didn't know anyone was listening," Rosa replied, running through the tricky section again. "Pretend no one's listening now." Rosa tried, but it was impossible. She was constantly aware of David sitting in his expensive chair, watching her with those intense eyes. And if she was nervous playing for just him, how would she handle a room full of wealthy strangers? 3 days before the event, everything fell apart. Rosa was leaving the building after practice when she noticed a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair waiting by the elevator. The woman was beautiful in that expensive way that only money could buy. Designer clothes, flawless makeup, jewelry that probably cost more than Rosa's rent. "You must be Rosa," the woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Do I know you?" Rosa asked cautiously. "I'm Victoria Sterling, David's business partner." Victoria extended a manicured hand. "And until recently, his fiancée." Rosa felt her stomach drop. Fiancé? David had never mentioned being engaged to anyone. "I think we need to talk," Victoria continued. "There's a coffee shop across the street, shall we?" Against her better judgment, Rosa found herself sitting across from Victoria in an upscale cafe, feeling completely out of place in her cleaning uniform. "I'm going to be direct with you," Victoria began, stirring her coffee with a silver spoon. "David has a history of this sort of thing." "What sort of thing?" "Charity cases. He likes to play savior to people he thinks need rescuing. Usually young women from difficult backgrounds." Victoria's voice was pleasant, but her words were like ice water. "He did the same thing with a waitress last year. Paid for her to go to culinary school. Set her up with a nice apartment. When she started getting too attached, he moved on." Rosa felt sick. "I don't believe you." "I have photos of them together if you'd like to see them." Victoria pulled out her phone. David throwing her a graduation party. David at her apartment. David looking at her the exact same way he looks at you now. The photos were real. Rosa could see David laughing with a pretty young woman, his arm around her shoulders. They looked happy together. Close. "What happened to her?" Rosa asked quietly. "She's fine. Working as a chef in California now. I'm sure she's grateful for David's help." just like you'll be grateful someday. Victoria put her phone away. The thing is, Rosa, David gets bored easily. Right now, you're interesting because you're different from the women in his usual social circle. But once the novelty wears off... He's just helping me with the charity event, Rosa protested, but even as she said it, she knew it sounded weak. Is he? Or is he trying to turn you into his version of the perfect woman? Someone talented and beautiful and grateful, but not quite his equal? Victoria leaned forward. Tell me, has he offered to pay for your education, help you get into a better music program, set you up with connections in the classical music world? Rosa's silence was answer enough. David had mentioned all of those things during their conversations this week. He means well, Victoria continued. David isn't a bad person, but he has a savior complex. He needs to feel needed, and right now you need saving. The question is, what happens when you don't need him anymore? Rosa left the coffee shop feeling like the ground had shifted under her feet. Everything Victoria said made horrible sense. David was a billionaire who could have any woman he wanted. Why would he be interested in someone like her unless it was some kind of charity project? The next 2 days were torture. Rosa continued practicing for the charity event, but her heart wasn't in it anymore. David seemed to notice her distance but didn't push when she gave short answers to his questions. The morning of the charity event, Rosa's phone rang. It was Lucia. Rosa, I have good news, her sister said excitedly. The hospital worked out a payment plan with our insurance. I only need about $1,500 now instead of $5,000. Rosa should have been relieved. But all she could think about was that she was performing tonight for money she didn't really need anymore. And for a man who might be playing an elaborate game with her emotions. That evening, Rosa arrived at the venue early. It was a beautiful ballroom in one of Manhattan's most exclusive hotels. The kind of place she'd only seen in movies. Crystal chandeliers hung from painted ceilings, and tables draped in white linen filled the space. The grand piano sat on a small stage looking intimidating under the bright lights. Rosa wore the only nice dress she owned, a simple black one she'd bought for her college graduation. Next to the other women in their designer gowns, she felt like an imposter. Rosa! David appeared beside her, looking handsome in a perfectly fitted tuxedo. You look beautiful. Are you ready for this? Before she could answer, Victoria approached them. She looked stunning in an emerald green dress that probably cost more than Rosa made in a year. David, darling, Victoria said, kissing his cheek. I can't wait to hear your protégé play. The word protégé hit Rosa like a slap. Is that how everyone saw her? David's latest project? Victoria. I thought you weren't coming tonight, David said, and Rosa caught something uncomfortable in his voice. I wouldn't miss it. After all, I helped organize half these events when we were together. Victoria smiled sweetly at Rosa. I'm sure you'll do wonderfully, dear. David has such good instincts about talent. Rosa excused herself and escaped to the bathroom, where she splashed cold water on her face and stared at herself in the mirror. What was she doing here? These people had more money in their jewelry than she'd see in her lifetime. They were probably expecting some kind of sophisticated performance art, not a cleaning lady who learned piano from her grandmother. When she returned to the ballroom, the event was in full swing. Wealthy donors mingled over cocktails and expensive appetizers, while a string quartet played background music. Rosa watched David work the room, shaking hands and making small talk with people who clearly adored him. This was his world. These were his people. And Rosa was just the evening's entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, someone announced over the microphone, please take your seats. We're ready to begin tonight's musical performance. Rosa's hands were shaking as she walked toward the piano. The ballroom fell quiet, and she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. At the piano bench, she adjusted her dress and placed her hands on the keys. The first notes of Mozart filled the room, but Rosa's playing felt mechanical and lifeless. She was hitting all the right keys, but the magic that had filled David's office night after night was gone. Instead, she kept thinking about Victoria's words and the photos of David with that other woman. Halfway through the piece, Rosa made a mistake. A small one that most people probably wouldn't notice, but it threw off her concentration. She stumbled through the rest of the Mozart and moved on to her second piece, a Chopin nocturne that had always been one of her favorites. But tonight, even Chopin couldn't save her. Rosa's playing was technically correct but emotionally empty. She was going through the motions, delivering exactly what these people expected. A competent performance by the cleaning lady who got lucky. When she finished, the applause was polite, but not enthusiastic. Rosa stood up from the bench, gave a small bow, and walked off the stage. She'd done what David asked her to do. Now she just wanted to collect her payment and leave. But as she headed toward the exit, she heard David's voice behind her. "Rosa, wait." He caught up to her near the ballroom doors. "That wasn't you up there. What's wrong?" Rosa turned to face him, and for a moment she saw genuine concern in his eyes. But then she remembered Victoria's photos and steeled herself. "Nothing's wrong," she said. "I played the pieces you asked me to play. The check should be made out to Rosa Martinez. Rosa, please. Talk to me. Did something happen? You've been different the past few days." "I think we should end this," Rosa said quietly. "Whatever this is, I'm grateful for the opportunity, but I think it's better if we go back to the way things were before." David looked like she'd hit him. "I don't understand. I thought we had become friends." "We were never friends, David. We're from different worlds. This was always going to end eventually." Rosa walked away before David could respond, leaving him standing alone in the elegant ballroom. As she waited for the elevator, she could hear the string quartet starting up again, playing cheerful music for people who had no idea that her heart was breaking. 3 months passed without Rosa setting foot in the Wellington Tower. She'd requested a transfer to a different building, and her supervisor had agreed without asking questions. Rosa threw herself into her college classes and spent her free time helping Lucia recover from her surgery, which had gone perfectly thanks to the money from the charity performance. But something had changed in Rosa that night at the hotel. The joy she'd always found in music felt muted, like someone had turned down the volume on her favorite song. She still practiced piano at the community center where she volunteered, but her playing lacked the passion it once had. David had tried to contact her several times in the weeks after the charity event. He'd called, sent emails, even showed up at her apartment building once, but Rosa had avoided him completely. What was the point? Victoria had been right. They lived in different worlds, and Rosa had been foolish to think otherwise. One rainy Thursday evening, Rosa was leaving her community college when she saw a familiar figure waiting by the bus stop. David stood under a small umbrella, looking nothing like the confident businessman she remembered. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair was messy, and he looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. "Rosa," he said when he saw her, "please don't run away. I just want to talk. How did you know I'd be here? I may have asked around at the coffee shop near your old building. Someone mentioned you took classes at night." David stepped closer, and Rosa could see dark circles under his eyes. "I've been trying to understand what happened that night. Why you suddenly wanted nothing to do with me?" Rosa pulled her jacket tighter against the rain. "It doesn't matter now. It matters to me." David's voice was quiet but intense. "Rosa, I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hit Rosa like a physical blow. She'd dreamed of hearing something like that from him, but now they just made her angry. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't make this harder than it already is." "Make what harder? I don't understand what I did wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong," Rosa said, and she meant it. "You're a good person, David. You helped me when I needed it, just like you helped that waitress you dated last year." David's face went pale. "Who told you about Jennifer? Does it matter? The point is, I understand now. I understand what I am to you." "And what's that?" "A project. A charity case. Someone you can save and feel good about yourself." Rosa's voice cracked slightly. "And maybe for a while you convince yourself it's something more. But eventually you get bored and move on to the next person who needs rescuing." David stood there in the rain looking stunned. Rosa, that's not what happened with Jennifer, and it's definitely not what's happening with you, isn't it? You're a billionaire, David. You could date actresses, politicians, Nobel Prize winners. Why would you want to be with someone like me unless it made you feel like some kind of hero? Because you make me feel human again." David's voice rose above the sound of the rain. "Because when I listen to you play, I remember what it feels like to care about something other than profit margins and stock prices. Because you're the first person in years who's seen me as just David, not as Wellington Industries or a net worth figure." Rosa wanted to believe him. Part of her desperately wanted to believe him. But Victoria's words echoed in her head. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't be your experiment in dating outside your social class. That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" "Really? Because from where I stand, It looks like a rich man who got bored with his regular life and decided to play around with the help. The hurt that flashed across David's face was so raw that Rosa almost apologized immediately. But she forced herself to stay strong. "If that's really what you think of me," David said quietly, "then I guess I've been wrong about everything." He turned and walked away, leaving Rosa standing alone at the bus stop. As she watched him disappear into the rainy night, Rosa felt like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. But it was better this way, she told herself. Better to end things now before she got hurt even worse. 2 weeks later, Rosa was practicing piano at the community center when one of the other volunteers approached her. "Rosa, there's someone here to see you," the woman said. "She says her name is Jennifer and she knows you from—" "David Wellington?" Rosa's heart stopped. Jennifer, the waitress from Victoria's photos. She followed the volunteer to the main lobby where a pretty woman with short brown hair was waiting. "You must be Rosa," Jennifer said with a warm smile. "I hope you don't mind me tracking you down like this. David gave me your name." "David sent you?" "Not exactly. I reached out to him after I heard what happened." "Can we talk somewhere private?" They ended up in a small cafe near the community center. Jennifer ordered coffee for both of them and got straight to the point. "David is miserable," she said. "He's been calling me every few days trying to understand what went wrong between you two. He seems to think I can give him insight into why you believe he only dates women as charity projects." "Aren't you proof of that?" Rosa asked. "He helped you get into culinary school, set you up with an apartment." Jennifer laughed, but it wasn't mean. "Is that what someone told you?" "Rosa, David never paid for my culinary school. He never set me up with anything. We dated for about 6 months, and yes, he supported my dreams, but so did I support his. That's what people do when they care about each other." Rosa stared at her. "But the photos I saw were probably from my culinary school graduation party, which David attended because we were still friends after we broke up. We ended things because we realized we weren't right for each other long term, not because he got bored with his charity case." Jennifer leaned forward. "Rosa, David talked about you constantly when we were together, about this incredible pianist who worked in his building. He was fascinated by you months before you ever spoke to each other." "That's impossible. He didn't even know I existed." "He knew you existed. He used to stay late at the office just hoping to hear you play. He told me once that listening to your music was the best part of his day." Rosa felt the world tilting around her. "But Victoria said—" "Ah." Jennifer's expression darkened. "Victoria Sterling. Let me guess. She showed you photos of David and me together and convinced you that he has a pattern of rescuing women and then discarding them?" Rosa nodded weakly. "Victoria has been trying to get David back for 2 years. She'll say anything to break up his relationships." Jennifer pulled out her own phone and showed Rosa a text message. "Look at what she sent me last week." The message read, "I took care of the pianist problem. David will realize soon enough that he belongs with someone from his own world." Rosa felt sick. She played us both. She's smart, I'll give her that. She told you exactly what you were already afraid of hearing. Jennifer put her phone away. "Rosa, I don't know what's going to happen between you and David, but I do know that what you two have is real. I saw how he lit up when he talked about you, and I heard how you played that night at the charity event. You were there? I was. And honey, that performance broke my heart. It was technically perfect, but it was like listening to someone going through the motions of living, instead of actually living." Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed Rosa's hand. "You want to know the difference between what David had with me and what he has with you? When he talked about me, he talked about how well we got along. When he talks about you, he talks about how you've changed his entire understanding of what love could feel like." That evening, Rosa found herself standing outside the Wellington Tower for the first time in 3 months. The security guard recognized her and waved her through without question. Her hands were shaking as she rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. David's office was dark, but she could see light coming from the conference room. Rosa walked in quietly and found David sitting at the piano bench, slowly picking out a simple melody with one finger. "That's the piece I played the first night," Rosa said softly. David looked up, startled. "Rosa, what are you doing here?" "I talked to Jennifer today." Rosa walked over to the piano. "She told me some interesting things about Victoria Sterling." David's face hardened. "What did Victoria tell you?" "That you have a pattern of rescuing women and then getting bored with them. That I was just your latest project." Rosa sat down on the bench beside David. But Jennifer told me something else. She said you talked about me even when you were dating her. I shouldn't have. It wasn't fair to Jennifer. David's fingers found a few more notes of the melody, but yes, I did. I was fascinated by the person who could make this piano sing like that. Why didn't you ever tell me that you used to listen to me play before we met? Because I was embarrassed. It felt like stalking. I was this rich guy lurking around hoping to catch glimpses of the beautiful woman who worked nights and played piano like an angel. David looked at her seriously. Rosa, I need you to know something. That night when I made that stupid comment about marrying you if you could play piano, I wasn't making fun of you. I was so moved by your music that I said the first thing that came into my head. And what came into my head was that any man would be lucky to spend his life with someone that talented. Rosa felt tears building in her eyes. I was so scared that you were just playing with me. That eventually you'd realize I wasn't worth the trouble. Worth the trouble? David turned on the bench to face her fully. Rosa, you're the best thing that's happened to me in years. Maybe ever. You make me want to be better than I am. Not richer or more successful. Better as a person. Even though I'm just a cleaning lady who never finished college, you're not just anything. You're Rosa Martinez, the woman who can make a piano weep with joy. You're the person who volunteers at a community center teaching music to kids who can't afford lessons. You're someone who works 2 jobs to help pay for her sister's medical bills. David reached over and took her hands. You're the woman I fell in love with not because I wanted to save you, but because you saved me. Rosa looked down at their joined hands. His were soft from his privileged life. Hers were calloused from hard work. But somehow they fit together perfectly. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have since that first night, but I was too scared to admit it. David smiled, and Rosa remembered why she'd fallen for him in the first place. Not because he was rich or powerful, but because when he smiled like that, he looked like someone who understood what it meant to find unexpected magic in an ordinary moment. So what happens now? Rosa asked. Now you play something for me, David said. Something that sounds like a new beginning. Rosa placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. This time the music was full of all the emotions she'd been holding back. The fear, the love, the hope, and the joy of finally being honest about what she felt. David listened with his eyes closed, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. That, he said finally, sounded like the rest of our lives. 6 months later, David proposed to Rosa in the same conference room where they'd first met. But instead of the impulsive, awkward proposal he'd made that first night, he got down on one knee and asked properly. The ring was beautiful but not ostentatious. David had learned that Rosa preferred meaning over expense. Their wedding was small and held at the community center where Rosa taught. Instead of a traditional ceremony, they exchanged vows while Rosa played piano and David turned pages for her. It wasn't the kind of society wedding David's friends expected, but it was perfect for them. As Rosa played their first song as a married couple, she thought about how wrong she'd been to think they came from different worlds. Love, she realized, creates its own world wherever it finds 2 people brave enough to believe in it.